Hello kids, it's me again, back with another video. I would like to start this video off with a story. So, if you don't know, I went to film school. Not a fancy film school, but a school that taught film at the collegiate level. And in one of my writing classes, my professor was on the subject of... I can't remember what subject he was on. We were talking about something in class, and the subject of Tyler Perry came up. And being that I was quite literally the only black person in that class, I decided to chime in and voice my displeasure and dislike for the rather famous filmmaker. I said something along the lines of, Tyler Perry makes movies for... Maybe I said stupid people? I don't think I said stupid people, but I do know that's how my professor took it. And he went on this whole tirade about how, not everybody wants to go to the theaters and see Inception. Sometimes they want to turn their brain off and watch something dumb. And while I do agree with that, I still don't like Tyler Perry, and for very nuanced reasons, more nuanced than I was able to present at the time. So, that's what this video is about, talking about why Tyler Perry should not really be a representative for black media, we'll say. Here's something that some people may or may not know. I feel like if you consume a lot of Tyler Perry content, or if you just watch BET or TBS a lot, I actually don't know if his stuff is still on TBS, but definitely BET. One thing about Tyler Perry is that not only does he write all of his shows and movies, but he directs all of them and he produces all of them, and that's a problem. Now, why is the fact that he writes all of his programming a problem? Because, there are a lot of, we'll call them auteur directors, who write and direct all of the movies that they do, and while that's fine, I think the fact that he does that for his films is fine. It's a thing that happens in the film industry already. He's a kind of auteur director himself, but mostly I have a problem with him doing it for his television shows, and here's why. So, if you don't know how it works, I'm not going to go and break down the entire hierarchy of TV writing, but basically the way it works is that at the top you'll have the executive producer for a show. They're basically the ones who call all the shots creatively, and then under them you'll have the showrunners. Sometimes the showrunners and the executive producer are the same person, sometimes they're separate, and then under the showrunners you have staff writers, who are, we'll say, 5 to maybe 10, depending on the show, 10 people who write for that show. And then under them you have writer's assistants, but they're not really important for this purpose. Tyler Perry is basically all of those. He's filling the role of 15 different people, and for a TV show that's just not good. Because the thing about TV writing, as opposed to film writing, you could essentially have, maybe for one season, 10 feature-length scripts, and that takes a lot to develop. A lot of time to develop, I'll say. And, Tyler, he's known for his prolificness. He writes a lot, and he's known for the speed in which he does it, which is pretty fast for one person. But I think the best part of a writer's room, and I did sort of kind of be in a writer's room, not professionally, of course. I will say in 2019, my university was developing a web series. That was actually part of that writing class. It was a TV writing class, actually, that we were taking. As part of that web series development, there were a group of us bouncing ideas off of each other to put in the web series. And I will say, for a TV show, I think it's really important. Well, it's not even what I think. It's been proven that it's important to have more than one person sitting there bouncing ideas off of each other. Of course, at the end of the day, you're going to have to run it by the showrunners and the executive producer. The whole concept is that 2 heads are better than 1. Usually, when you're writing something, at least for me, I'll say that when I'm writing something, it's usually better for me to run my ideas by another person, so I can just get another perspective on things and know whether or not something's working. Which is why if I were ever to become a professional television film writer, I would probably want a writing partner, because My brain on its own, it does some good things sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, but I have worked so much better in groups. I excelled in that writer's room. I came up with so many good ideas, if I do say so myself, and I just think it's important to have a fully fleshed out writer's room. And also it's a lot faster because you have multiple people writing basically at the same time, and it really streamlines the process. And while Tyler Perry does write his shows very quickly, it could probably go a whole lot faster, but we're gonna go into why he doesn't want to have writers later. It's a very interesting reason, one that I didn't know until recently, but it makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Some of you might remember a certain video that came out, I want to say the beginning of 2020, if not the end of 2019, on Tyler Perry's Instagram. I'm gonna play the video here.
So I don't know if you know this, but all shows on television have a writer's room. And most of the time there are 10 people, 12, whatever, that write all these television shows, right? Well, I have no writer's room. Nobody writes any of my work. I write it all. Why am I telling you this? I wrote all of these scripts by myself in 2019. What's my point? Work ethic!
So yeah, I gotta disagree with him there. Him writing all of that stuff, that's not work ethic. That's honestly not really laziness, because obviously you can't be lazy if you're gonna write all of that stuff. That takes some amount of dedication. But if you think about it, he wrote all of that stuff in 2019, but how much of it is actually good? You know? How much of it is actually worthwhile writing? Which is why, going back to the whole writer's room thing, having a writer's room for a TV show is kind of essential. It's not a one-man job. One person just can't write an entire TV show. It just can't happen. It just can't. You need another person there, especially for the scale of shows that Tyler Perry has. It just can't work. And we've seen that it doesn't work because his writing is just, it's kind of sus sometimes. I don't know, the quality just isn't there.
I'm just too much for you. Me, my two dads. Me being in touch with my feminine side. My lace underwear. Hell, even me liking my prostate tickle.
It seems like all of his scripts are a first draft. There are no other drafts. His first draft is his last draft, and what he writes is what's going out there, weird lines and all. So I really don't think that's a really good way to run your production company that you put millions of dollars into. I don't know how he's seen inside of the industry, because I'm not inside of the industry and I don't know anybody inside the industry. But I have to say that it kind of looks bad for him to do that. He thinks that he's the best of the best that's going to be out there in terms of a television writer, and that's simply not the case. Also, for him as a director, his directing leaves a whole lot to be desired.
My lace underwear? Hell, even me liking my prostate tickle.
The only way I can describe it is just kind of meh. He's not particularly terrible, but he's not really that good either. There's a saying when I took my directing class in film school. I don't know if this is a direct quote. I can't really remember it because it was a while ago, but it went something like this. A good director brings out the best in a mediocre actor, but a bad director encourages mediocrity in an actor. And I kind of think that's what Tyler Perry is doing, is encouraging his actors to not really excel, Not because he enjoys his actors being bad, but probably because he's just not that good of a director and doesn't really know how to excel. And if I were to hazard a guess, I don't know the inside secrets, but I would say that Tyler Perry is probably surrounded by a lot of yes men, just people who do what he says. Perhaps he asks for someone's opinion and they just go along with it, say, yeah, it's good, it's great, because they don't want to upset the mighty Tyler Perry. Which, that's a whole other conversation in itself, the way that a whole lot of people, especially the underlings in the film and television industry, just kind of acquiesce to their superiors to not risk being fired. I don't like that that's a thing, but it is a thing. So all that being said about his directing, I will say, he's not that terrible of an actor when he's not in his own films and directing himself. I don't know if any of you remember this. It catches some people by surprise, caught me by surprise, certainly. But Tyler Perry was in Gone Girl, 2014 film, based on the novel by Gillian Flynn, and he was not terrible in it. His performance wasn't spectacular like Rosamund Pike's was, but it wasn't that terrible. And that's because the director, David Fincher, is a good director. And it goes back to that quote, a good director brings out the best in a mediocre actor. And whether or not Tyler Perry is mediocre, I'm not going to decide that. I think he's just fine. I'm not even going to comment on Medea. That's a whole other conversation to be had. About his producing, I did take a production class while I was in film school. Really, the only thing that I got out of that production class is that, one, I don't want to be a producer, and two, it's super stressful. I did learn about the ways of producing and everything, but through that, I really don't see how he could be producing all of these shows and movies like at once. That's kind of a lot of work to put on one person. Surely he has to have some kind of help there. I don't know. The fact that he's producing like 7 million shows at once, in order to be a good producer, you really have to put all of your time and energy into the project that you're working on, and you just can't do that when you're doing like 14 things at once. It's just not possible. So there has to be someone there helping him out. And this isn't in my outline. I have an outline on my computer. But I do also want to talk about his production company just a little bit. Tyler Perry Studios is the name of his production company. It's what I can only assume, multi-million-dollar production company, considering he has this gigantic compound in Atlanta with a bunch of like studio lots and like green space and a replica of the White House. Like, hello, that's kind of a lot. And yet, it seems like the only things that are coming out of Tyler Perry Studios are his own projects. Now, listen, I get that some people, or some producers, they make production companies to produce their own projects because it's just kind of easier that way than going through another production company. There's a whole business side to it. I can't really get into it right now because it's a lot. But it would make sense, except I feel like at this point in time, it would really do Tyler Perry some good to explore some new talent and actually produce some other works, It seems like all of his projects are kind of vanity projects. They all seem like a one-man show, essentially, considering he's writing, directing, and producing all of it, and sometimes acting in them too. Honestly, I don't know why he hasn't done this yet. I could probably see this on the horizon, but one of these days, we're gonna get a Tyler Perry movie where the credits are gonna roll afterwards, and it's just his name. He wrote it, directed, produced it, starred in it for 14 different roles. He was the gaffer for it. He set up all of the lights. He was the art director. I don't know why we haven't seen that yet, but honestly, it feels like an inevitability at this point, and I can only imagine how something like that would go down. Goodness. So I think one producer/production company to compare Tyler Perry with would be Shonda Rhimes and her production company Shondaland. And while she does do a lot of writing and maybe directing, maybe not directing, but definitely a lot of writing and producing for her shows, she also doesn't do them for a lot of them. I actually didn't know this, but until I started watching it, but How to Get Away with Murder, that's a Shondaland production. She doesn't write it, and she doesn't direct it. That's all somebody else. She is likely the producer on it, but, that is just one role that she does, and I think a lot of people like to compare the two kind of based on quality, but honestly, I will say this. A lot of Shondaland shows, they're definitely soap opera tier, but it's good, I really like Scandal, which, not a controversial take. I don't know why I presented it like it was, but I do like Scandal a lot, even though a lot of the plot lines are kind of weird. They get weird, especially in the later seasons, and kind of convoluted, but I really like it. I wouldn't call it trash TV, but it's almost a guilty pleasure. Almost, but not quite. And, I feel like her productions are definitely higher quality than Tyler Perry's. I will say that. I did talk about his compound in Atlanta. It's huge. I don't know how many acres, but probably a lot. Again, replica of the White House. Several sound stages. Just a whole lot. I will say though, for his actual studio space, There are movies and TV shows that are filmed there that are not Tyler Perry productions. However, that's just for his studio space, not really for his production company. He doesn't really lend any of his resources, aside from the studio space, which people are probably paying a lot for. I mean, that's kind of the only thing he offers, right? Like, if you ever thought, young burgeoning writers, if you ever thought about pitching something to Tyler Perry, take it somewhere else, because if he didn't write it, he's not gonna produce it. Bottom line. Like, I also have a problem with this because, being that I am an up-and-coming young talent in the industry who may want to explore film and TV writing at some point, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that Tyler Perry isn't really doing anything for this new generation of writers, like TV writers and film writers and anything like that. Like I said, if you thought about pitching something to Tyler Perry, he doesn't do that. So I really think he should, given that he is in like Atlanta and that's like, essentially Black Hollywood, he could be doing a whole lot more for young filmmakers and writers in the area, but he isn't because he just really likes his own material, and that's the only material he likes. And that was really proven in 2008. So, if you don't know, back in 2008, there was this huge Writers Guild of America strike. A lot of TV shows that were on the air at that time were affected by it. Some of them went off the air, some of them went with non-union writers. And just from skimming the Wikipedia page about it, I'm going to link it below because I think it deserves a full read. But I think the main concern was over residuals from DVD sales because, DVDs were like becoming a big thing in 2008 and it was like a whole deal. And so Tyler Perry used to have a writer's room. It wasn't always like this. He used to do things the way they were supposed to be done, but he found union writers a bit too much to deal with. I'll just read the article. So the title of this article is Tyler Perry addresses past union-busting controversy, says he fired writers because they weren't giving me what I wanted. The director and entertainment mogul shares his side of the controversy that occurred after he allegedly fired 4 writers for unionizing back in 2008. In 2008, Tyler Perry found himself in headlines after he allegedly fired 4 writers for unionizing. Now, the director has set the record straight. In a new interview with Level, Perry offered his side of why he actually fired the writers who were helping him with TBS shows House of Pain and Meet the Browns. At the time, I had a bunch of writers who were non-union, and I was unhappy with every single script they wrote, he said. They were not speaking to the voice. They just didn't get it. Now, I'm going to interject and say that typically, once TV shows are being published, you have something called a show Bible, which is essentially all of the major plot points, characters, and all of the themes that are going to be found in a show. And within a show Bible, at least when it gets to the point of being made, there's some kind of style guide in there, right? It's a guide for the writers to know how to write the series, basically. And so if those writers weren't writing in the voice of what Tyler Perry wanted, then I feel like that was on him to reinforce what that voice was instead of just firing them because he wasn't getting what he wanted, right? You gotta help your writers out instead of just expecting them to read your mind. There was a black woman lawyer I was negotiating with to get WGA, Writers Guild of America, writers on my show. He continued, I told her, I can't afford to pay these rates that every other studio pays. I need to structure differently. One thing I should also mention is that the film and television industry is heavily unionized. There are unions for basically every aspect of the film industry. And what these unions do is that they regulate how much a person can work so that they aren't overworked. There's a lot of strict rules in place, especially for actors and potentially writers as well. And also, they have concrete pay rates. So if you are in the Writers Guild, you're basically guaranteed a certain amount of pay, which is really good for protecting writers, but some individuals out there don't like that they have to adhere to rules and not overwork people, so sometimes they prefer to hire non-union people, which is perfectly legal and fine, but it's kind of scummy, It looked like the deal was going to go through, so I fired the 4 writers and prepared to hire new writers through the WGA, which again is going to make him pay the amount he's supposed to pay. Perry then goes on to dispute how reports at the time said he had fired his previous writers for trying to unionize, saying that he fired him because they weren't giving me what I wanted, which, be that as it may, you know, there was a whole conversation going on at the time in 2008 about the Writers Guild and unionized writers that may have, you know, soured his taste of union writers and made him not want to work with them. So even though he's saying that, oh, they weren't writing the way I wanted them to, like, you could have found a union writer, a whole gaggle of union writers who were willing to write in your voice, so to speak. But you didn't because they were too expensive. That's the real reason, in my opinion. The press says I fired writers who were trying to unionize. Not true, and it pissed me off, Perry said. The entertainment mogul then recounted the challenges he faced with unionized writers and how he'd still have to pay them multiple times for script rewrites. This is also true. When you are a union writer, not only do you get paid for the first draft of a script, and this goes for feature-length scripts as well, but if you specify that in your contract, then you also get paid for rewrites. And any rewrites that need to be done on the script that the director or executive producer or showrunner, etc. would want to have, if it's in that writer's contract, they have to not only be the ones who do the rewrites, but also get paid for the rewrites. And this is, again, another protection for writers so that they don't get exploited in their work. At one point, I thought they were submitting scripts that would need rewrites in order to get paid multiple times. And these are black people, he said. I had a moment where I asked for a rewrite and the writer filed a grievance with the union, he continued. They felt like I was asking for too many changes and would never accept the script. I was furious. Probably was asking for too many changes because he's essentially wanting someone to write what he would write, but what he would write probably isn't the best, you know? And these are like career writers that he was likely hiring who knew that, hey, this material isn't this good, but he wants me to write it so that it's like bad. And so that's how I came to the realization that Tyler Perry was anti-union. And anti-union is not something you want to be in the film and television industry. It's probably going to work to your detriment, but somehow Tyler Perry has excelled despite the fact that he's anti-union. Now, this only talks about, of course, the writers' union. I would hazard a guess that most of the actors he employs are in the Screen Actors Guild. He's probably in it too, he's an actor, so being that he is a part of a union, maybe not, I actually don't know, I should probably look it up, but being that he is at least familiar with unions, he should know that all of these rules and guidelines are in place to protect these workers, protect their rights, and make sure they get paid fair wages. So, I just can't trust anyone who's anti-union, period, but I also can't trust anyone who's anti-union, especially in the film and television industry. Now, there are a lot of conversations to be made about the content of his shows. So far, I've only been talking about the way he runs his business, that is Tyler Perry Studios, and the way that he, conducts business, and the fact that he doesn't hire any outside writing or directing talent or get any help with production or anything like that. And, I could spend some time talking about, the negative portrayal of black people in Tyler Perry's media, but I think I'll just let Spike Lee do that for me.
But I still think a lot of stuff that's on today is coonery and buffoonery. And I know it's making a lot of money, breaking records, but we could do better. That's just my opinion. I mean, I'm a huge basketball fan, and when I watch the games on TNT, I see these two ads for these two shows. I'm scratching my head. We got a black president. Are we going back to Mantan Moreland and sleep and eat?
Yet, if those films, we're talking about Tyler Perry at this point. Look, I'm not saying we're talking. Let's not give them fodder for tabloid. I'm not saying we're talking about Tyler Perry, but those are the shows that we're talking about. If we're talking about that, and we look at the numbers that come and see his movies, that view the shows on TBS, my question is that in fact maybe what Black America wants to see?
A large
well,
part.
Look, I hear a lot of no's and ahs, but a lot of people watching it.
Here's the thing, though. Because we've had this discussion back and forth because when John Singleton, people came out to see Boys in the Hood, needed a Rosewood, nobody showed up. So a lot of this is on us. A lot of this is on us. You vote with your pocketbook, your wallet. You vote with your time sitting in front of the idiot box. And the man has a huge audience, and Tyler's very smart. What he's done. He started out, with these plays, and church buses would pull up, packed, and he's parlayed it into bought his own jet. You can buy a jet, you got money. But at the same time, for me, just imagery is troubling.
Is there a disappointment from you as a director and an African American that Miracle at St. Anna won't get the same audience as some of the other movies that you will make? And therefore the idea of what we support?
Well, here's the thing. DVD is a director's best friend. So a lot of people have come up to me and said they like the film a lot, but for whatever reason they didn't get to see it in the theater, but they definitely got the bootleg or watched on television, pay-per-view. And even if nobody showed up, I wanted to make that film because Hollywood historically has omitted the contribution of 1.1 African American men and women who fought and died for this country in World War II. And I just got tired of seeing these films again and again and again, which is not give any love to us. The first person to die for this country was a black man, Crispus Attucks. We're not talking, we're more patriotic than anybody.
And yeah, he basically summed it up way better than I could, and very succinctly too. So, in conclusion, if you do like Tyler Perry stuff, I don't want you to feel bad about it. We all have things that we like. Sometimes they're not the best, most, constructive media to be viewing, and, we like what we like. Sometimes it's garbage, sometimes it isn't. Not all of us can watch big brain movies and be entertained by them. Sometimes, like my film professor said, we just gotta shut our brains off and watch some garbage. So if you do like Tyler Perry movies, don't feel bad about it. It's fine, he's getting the bag and I can't be mad at him for that. I just want you to know that there is a lot more good black media out there, and one example that I have is Atlanta, written by a black person, starring black people. I really like Atlanta. It's up there with one of my favorite shows. It's not my favoritist, but I feel like it's a really well-rounded show. It has really good writing. It feels really familiar to me in a strange way as a black person, even though I'm not from Atlanta and I've never really spent a meaningful amount of time there. It felt like, these were people that I knew, or, a friend of a friend or something like that, which is why I really liked Atlanta a lot. Also, it's just really funny. It's hilarious sometimes. My favorite episode of Atlanta is the one where Paperboy goes on the public access show and all the fake commercials, but also, it has its funny points, it has its really high dramatic points. It's really heartwarming at times, and it's really sad at times too. It's got all the emotions. And hopefully season 4 will be coming out soon. If only Donald Glover weren't out there doing literally everything, we could have it sooner. But no, the man just has to go being amazing at everything and take up his time with his other creative pursuits, so we're gonna have to wait. That's really all I have for today. Those are my thoughts. What do you think about Tyler Perry's media? How do you feel about it? I will mention that this video is mainly about his films and his television shows, not his plays. I haven't really seen any of his plays. Yeah, I haven't seen any. They could be just fine, but I'm not really in the theater world. I know he has like music in his plays too. I don't know if he writes that music or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, honestly. Again, it's a one-man show. What are your thoughts? What do you have to say about it? How do you feel? How do you feel about this whole mess? Sound off below. And also, I know I haven't been, I guess, as active recently, and I won't be very active in the coming weeks for reasons that will be made clear to you in the future. I can't spill the beans yet, but I am very excited about it. There are exciting weeks ahead of me, and I will be sharing that with you all when the time comes. Here's my Twitter, here's my Ko-fi. Oh, here's my Medium down here. I posted a new article yesterday. It wasn't really that new because it was just a transcription of one of my other YouTube videos. After this week, there probably won't be any weekly Medium articles because, again, reasons that will be made clear to you in the future. At this point, the only reason that I'm trying to be a screenwriter is to spite Tyler Perry. So we'll see how that goes.